And g'day, fans, and welcome back to a brand new series of DNA reviews. We're not reviewing Star Wars, we're reviewing the old Docky Who. And for those who are interested, not only was yesterday my birthday, but today's the birthday for George Lucas. But instead of talking about Star Wars like we should be, we're off in a completely different direction because my buddy, Mr. Aaron over there, said, no, Docky Who must take priority. And for that reason, here we are, Mr. Aaron. How you going?
Well, I didn't say it takes priority over George Lucas. I did say all the things we've reviewed have mainly been Star Trek and Star Wars. So I did think we should give Doctor Who a fair shake. That might have been a mistake, though.
Everybody's joining us. Look at that. Got the Who things going on, Mr. Eanes, and they're absolutely fantastic. Now, the funny thing about this entire review, now this is primarily for people who don't really know us at all. So when it comes to the good old Docky Who, as I like to call it, the interesting thing is that Aaron is, for want of a better term, a Doctor Who expert, right? So you know a lot about the series. You've been following it your whole life. You're really, really dialed into it. As for myself, I'm not a fan at all. And aside from being forced to watch Legends of the Sea Devils, I haven't seen Docky Who since the 80s. So the new series I've just not watched any of it. It just has no interest in me whatsoever, which means I'm coming at this from a completely different outsider's perspective. So I've got no preconceptions, no sort of baggage from previous doctors and stories and who the writers are and who the cast are, going in completely stone cold. And so it was interesting when Aaron suggested we do this series. So instead of having two Doctor Who experts talking about the two episodes we're going to cover, have one who's an expert and one who's a complete, like, nuff, if you will. So, and that's me. So, what do you reckon of that, Mr. Aaron?
It's interesting that this is the point that you've chosen to jump onto the series and start watching it, because there are probably much better places to start than this. But I guess because this is current, this is what we're looking at.
Yeah, but the thing is, people didn't know that, right? And I know even people like yourself said, and of course, for those who don't know, and I think most people do, Aaron, you run your own shop, your own collectible store, and a lot of people come in who are big Doctor Who fans, and they discuss the show with you. And when I'm there, I hear all these discussions, and the general consensus is that the previous the 13th Doctor stories weren't very, very good. The Russell T Davies guy has now come back. It's supposed to be the greatest thing in the entire universe. Brand new Doctor, a really cool writer has come back. What could possibly go wrong? So I think there was an air of expectation to say that this is just going to kick off and just go absolute gangbusters from the outset. So, but as we go through our particular discussion, because Aaron and I have not discussed this at all, I have an idea what he thinks, but he's got no idea what I think, and we'll sort of see what happens. But first things first, Christy said hello to both myself and George. Good to see I came first. Now that's very important. Even Colin said happy birthday to me, which is good. And there we go. Was it? DG jumps on, everybody else is jumping off. There we go, which is very, very cool. So the key thing is, before we get right into the guts of it, there will be spoilers. I think most people who are keen on the old Docky Who would have seen it already, but if you haven't and don't want to be spoiled, then we highly recommend that you tune away now. So normally what would happen in our previous DNA reviews, we would analyze the entire show like almost like scene by scene, effectively. What we've done to keep this a bit more simpler is Aaron has supplied all these pictures, and we're breaking it down into the things that worked, things that didn't work, and the things that were just effectively terrible, for want of a better term. And so that is, in this case, what you'd call, like, the first episode is Sugar Babies, and it's the good, the bad, and the ugly. And of course, people who are watching this right now, we certainly encourage them to put their thoughts and views forward. Obviously, stay respectful. But the key thing is that everyone has a thought about it. Everybody has an opinion about it. I think the big issue about the show was that it had a massive amount of expectation on top of it. So I think it's almost like, dare I say, using Star Wars analogy, the Phantom Menace scenario, where everyone expected this thing to just go gangbusters, as I said earlier, from the outset. And did it? Maybe, maybe not. What do you reckon, Mr. Aaron?
I'll just make a correction to you there. It wasn't Sugar Babies, it was Space Babies.
Oh, did I say did I say Sugar Babies? Did I? Oh, here we go.
Yeah, got him on the
Where was
mind.
that coming from?
So I think what you said earlier is absolutely correct. Some people absolutely loved the previous era with Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor, but not a lot, I would say, just in my opinion. And everyone was really looking forward to this. And I think it is one of those things, be careful what you wish for, because you might just get it. And Russell T Davies has come back and, in my opinion, proven that in spades. Where do we even start, Dags?
Very cool.
I guess the thing is, Disney Plus. It's on Disney Plus now. So although it's still made by the BBC, I think it's taken a total tonal change. I don't know if that's deliberate because it's on Disney Plus or it was just going this way anyway. But I will probably see this era now going forward as Disney Doctor Who, especially if the tone stays the same as it is at the moment. I guess for someone who hasn't watched as much Doctor Who, you have seen some of the 70s stuff. Even the Christmas specials, they had, Russell T Davies' sort of hallmark tone from when he left. This has gone a lot further into the sort of more light entertainment sort of genre than the science fiction genre. I don't mind singing episodes of things, and I don't mind stuff like Space Babies as concepts if there's a good story behind it. But it almost seems like they had an idea and then wrote subpar story around the idea. So for Doctor Who fans, there's a pantheon of stories, and if I was to name them, Happiness Patrol, Twin Dilemma, Time Flight, Paradise Towers, I would say most people would realize they're not the ones that are regarded as highly. I think Space Babies will be mentioned when these stories are being mentioned rather than some of the more classic Doctor Who stories. What did you think of the tone?
All right. So I'm going to do is I'm going to stop you right there. The idea is we're going to go through it all, right? Rate it,
Yep.
and then do a bit of a summary at the end. Otherwise, we're just going to be jumping the gun right away through. One comment that did come through is, and I've lost it. Ads has said the opening and closing themes were good. The old jazzed up version of the Doctor Who theme, which is particularly cool. But we're looking at Space Babies. My mistake. So first things first, based on the images that you presented, the thing that I found interesting is that the episode kicked off directly straight after the Christmas special, where Ruby gets into the TARDIS and the Doctor announces the fact that he's a TARDIS, which is he's the Doctor, which I thought was kind of funny because if you look at the Christmas special, sure, he knows who he is, but it's like a big presence to say, here I am. So it's almost like I found the funny thing about this particular episode, it was like a Doctor Who 101 episode where he had to say, this is the TARDIS, I'm a Time Lord, I'm from Gallifrey, I do this and this and this, as if like maybe it's the Disney thing. They were expecting a whole new audience to sign in and watch this show from the very outset without having to watch anything previously. And I thought, yeah, that was an interesting sort of way to cover everything off for those who already knew these facts.
I think you're absolutely right. I think even though they had the specials, Disney really hadn't taken over full control until this era. So I do think they wrote it as a cold introduction for new viewers that might be jumping on for the first time. So even though they've had 3 or 4 specials on Disney Plus before this is renamed Series 1. And this was the first episode of Series 1 of the new Doctor Who, which drives me nuts because it's a continuing series. So why rename it Series 1?
Yeah, well, that argument goes right back to the mid 2005s when the new series started, the new Who, as they call it. It should now be season 60 something or 50 something or whatever. A couple of things, quick. Was it, Karan has asked, was it a hit in the UK? Just give me a very simple answer, yes or no?
No, probably the worst live rating of Doctor Who in its 60 year history.
Geez, okay, fair enough then.
Until
Mark,
the next one, which was
okay.
lower.
So Mark has mentioned he obviously didn't like it because he wasn't Space Babies, it was Space Junk. So it was kind of interesting to sort of see it that way. And Colin has got a good point. Personally, he has no doubt that the Disney powers that be had some influence in this series storylines. I totally agree. I think they've realised what their market is. Their market is not the traditional fan base. It's a brand new fan base and a younger fan base, and they're aimed directly at that. Whether that is a good thing or not, only time will tell. But it certainly hasn't gravitated or worked with everybody. With that in mind, there was some really, really nice imagery for the Space Babies sequence, especially when they land on the ship and they're sort of sussing everything out. What I really kind of dial into was the fact that Ruby, who has just become a companion, has just really dialed into the whole space travel thing. And I do like the sequence when she's looking out the window and you realize, yeah, this is like really way out there. She's really outside of a comfort zone, but she takes it on board really, really quickly. So, yeah, I thought that was actually quite good.
Yeah. One of the things that as a fan, you noticed instantly it is a soft reboot because Russell T Davies has been taking lines and imagery from the old series, and the scene in this where they look out the window is almost exactly the same as what happens when Rose first travels in the TARDIS with Christopher Eccleston, down to the point where he pulls out the mobile phone and gets her to call her mother. So that's obviously not aimed at fans who would point that out as sort of a retread, but for new people watching it.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of the redesign of the sonic screwdriver. I mean, it is meant to be a screwdriver, so the idea you turn it into what, like effectively like an iPad with the USB port sticking out there. I don't know where that was coming from. So at
Do you
least
know
with the
why they?
idea of
Do you know
the
why they
long
did that?
cylindrical thing. What?
Do you know why they did that? It just makes me shake my head because Russell T Davies has decided that the old sonic screwdriver looks too much like a gun, so kids might
Ah,
pretend
okay.
to shoot people with it. We can't have that after 60 years of the long screwdriver, can we?
Yeah, exactly right. Guy said he thought the babies looked creepy, but he thought that added to it. And with the babies, you've listed them as bad. It's very funny. Now, once again, as a complete outsider, I did not know what to expect. And I thought I had no real issue with it. Actually, I found that the kids came in and they're speaking this. The digital work on the mouths was fantastic. I did find that this kid down here always looked like he was unhappy, no matter what was going on. But
Yeah.
it wasn't the worst thing I'd ever seen, and I go, you know what, I can kind of handle it. I can kind of deal with it. So, I mean, obviously, a lot of people like yourself didn't like it, but for myself, I go, all right, this is what we've got, and just move on and see what happens.
Well, I listed it as bad. I do agree with you. The mouth when they were talking was quite good, but because they are doing the whole um, putting it on a existing baby, they're not doing the whole expressions and
Yeah.
stuff. So you've got babies sort of going, "I love you, Ruby," and it's no expression on the face at all, kind of thing. So that's why I listed it as bad. The other thing, can you imagine? I don't know how many babies were on the set when they were filming. Can you imagine how hard this episode must have been to film, wrangling
Yeah.
babies and trying to get them looking the right direction and stuff like that?
Yep, no, I totally agree with you. It's probably like when you take family photos with babies, you do all the waving behind the camera and they just look and hopefully you get the right shots. Marcus said that his family loved the love. That's an interesting sort of term, the first two episodes, but I think it needs to watch them again. Hopefully there'll be a changing pace. I would like to give it a chance. It depends. This is interesting because if you were to do a study and say, what's the target audience for this show? I think it's probably safe to say, especially this particular episode, the target audience is not older males, putting it simply. It is aimed at younger
Yeah.
people, children, and or as Mark said, family orientated viewing, because it's actually quite simple. It's quite simple, it's quite colorful, and you don't have to really think hard about it. And I think the idea was, they said, well, if you introduce all the babies up front, people are going to really gravitate to that and go, oh, how cute are they? Oh, they can talk. This is really, really groovy, and aim the story in that direction. The problem is, of course, that it alienates half your audience who go, this is a really stupid concept. We want to see something quite serious. And I'll bring up a point towards the end. Now, Shane has made a point about something, but that's actually a bit further on in the conversation. So we'll get to that with the point when it comes up. So um, Russell T. Davies said he changed because he didn't want kids. I like the sonic screwdriver. Yeah, exactly right. So it's almost changing a massive amount of history. And this also brought up something that you didn't like, which, funnily enough, is what had Shane mentioning about the spaceship at the end. But first things first, there were some things about this you didn't like at all.
Well, what I put there is a couple of instances of the plot that I just thought was stupid. You have the babies blowing their noses and it being collected in a receptacle. And we have, of course, spoilers. So it goes to what creates the monster. And again, you've got Russell T Davies' sort of obsession with farting. We had that with the Slitheen, but I think this was even worse, where they ignite the methane from the babies' nappies to fly a ship between planets. Which is very, it's very probably entertaining and makes sense to kids, but to an adult audience, it just doesn't cut it, I don't think.
So I looked at it from the point of view of saying, so we're sort of jumping around a little bit. So with the bogeyman, they actually made a point of calling it the bogeyman, which they're trying to say is the boogeyman, which is, I mean, the thing is made out of mucus, quite simply. And I'm surprised they just didn't
Yes.
say that, right? And I go, okay, fine. So the monster is made out of mucus. Okay, there's the joke. Okay, and it came from all the kids. Okay, yeah, funny, funny, funny. The thing I couldn't understand is that this thing is the monster running in the deck down below. It's the big alien. It's going around. It's terrorizing everybody. When they have the opportunity to get rid of it, they all have a change of heart. And they say, no, save it. And you go, well, hang on. Why is this sudden change of heart all of a sudden? All the kids are watching the screen. Oh, no, don't hurt it. And thinking, well, hang on. The whole up to this point, for 6 years, you've been afraid of this thing. Now you've got a chance to get rid of it. Now you want to save it. What happens when you save it? Do you just leave it down there, like forever? And that was a bit, I think, what happened is in the writer's room, they've said, you know what? Little kids watching this will go, oh, no, we can't have the monster get destroyed. That was actually quite upsetting. So we'll save the monster. The doctor will have a complete change of heart and say, no, I'll save it. It's all good. But it's a pointless ending. And I think that was intentionally done so people wouldn't get upset by seeing something get die, even though it's kind of dying in the process, is getting sucked out of the airlock. That, I think, was a bit of a cheat's way out of making sure your bad guy lives on, which was disappointing.
It was very similar death to the Alien and Alien Resurrection, the sort of baby alien that gets sucked out of the airlock, right to the point of little bits of it being coming off as it goes along. Where I say it seems almost dumbed down. They've done airlocks in Doctor Who. If you open something to space, the air's gone in seconds. They had the slowest countdown with like 3% air left, 2% air left. I was just like, oh, geez,
that's standard.
It really is for kids level stuff. It is one of those things as well where I think Doctor Who is a family program. I do really think it's now skewed towards kids, but who knows? If you get all kids in for this episode and the next episode's a really dark one, do you lose the kids' audience? I'm not sure what they're trying to do with this.
See, the other thing I thought was interesting as well, you get to the end of the story and they go, oh, the spaceship can't move. Oh, hang on, we've got all this methane gas built up downstairs from the children. We can use that to get the ship out of orbit and off to to safety. And I looked at that and I thought, well, in another story in another show, they would say, well, kids, you're just going to have to live here and just deal with it. But clearly someone said, no, you can't have that. You can't have the kids saying, we've now saved the bad guy. We've now got to save the kids as well. And so it's a big, happy, tick the box ending for everyone. Whether it's feasible, whether it works, whether it's good for like storytelling, probably not. And it's just a safe way out. And it all happens at the last minute too. It's not like they're saying, oh, the methane's all going to blow up. We've got to do whatever we can to save it so we can get the ship to move. It's suddenly at the end of the story, oh, we've got this methane gas that's buried down below. We're good to go. That seems like a real cop-out and fast writing to go, we've got 3 minutes to finish the episode. Let's just invent a really cockeyed and dumb solution. And I think that's probably something that irked a few people along the way.
I totally agree with you. It just feels like dumbed down writing. When I heard the name Space Baby, straight away I thought I don't know if this is a good idea to open a brand new series of a flagship show on Disney with this, but it could be good. And I was thinking, you could have done a story where you have basically the crew of the Enterprise and they get reduced to babies. So they're space babies, but they're smart and doing all the stuff. I didn't understand really why they were babies, but they were 6 years old, but they were still babies. Again, it was this vague script thing where they're like, oh, we haven't grown up properly, which doesn't make any sense at all. I hate writing where the writing just serves the plot to move it along rather than making any sense. So you have a throwaway line to sort of cover stuff like that. I just thought it was very lazily written.
Yeah, the thing I was frustrated is the doctor kept saying babies, space babies. Just like, dude, you don't have to keep repeating yourself. Christy said much of the humor is very juvenile and turns off many people. And I think that was, as we said, it's definitely aimed at a younger audience. As I said, why does Disney feel the need to change the target audience? Probably because the target audience is where the money comes from. Every time they get on new hands on a new IP. Because they've got the product and they go, well, by default, Disney is a family thing, right? It's just by default, right? So regardless of whatever's come in the past, there's their chance to sort of reinvigorate it, do something different with it to aim to a whole new fan base. The question is as to whether it works or not and what the cost is in the interim in terms of alienating everybody else. The Boogeyman got saved because he's different, he still deserves to live. Huh? What?
That was basically what they said in the plot. That was just basically in the plot. He's because everyone's unique, so he deserves to live. What I was going to bring up about space babies, though, I don't know if they were playing some kind of space baby drinking game where we'll put this in. So, every time the doctor says space babies, if you scull a drink, you'll be paralytic 5 minutes in. There is actually an episode of Doctor Who, Sleep No More, where the doctor actually says, you don't put space in front of a word to make it sci-fi. You don't have space ice cream because when ice cream's in space, it's still just ice cream. You don't have space doctors. When you're a doctor in space, you're still just a doctor. So they've actually had that as a plot point before. And then they kind of just turned it upside down and threw that around. Yeah.
Yep. All right. I'm still going through the things. Shane has said, remember about how the episode had 3 years of development. So as per Colin's comment earlier, you do wonder how much Disney had the influence in saying, well, you can do this and you can't do that. And as Colin said, Disney have their happily ever after scenario. Remembering, and this is important, if the idea of the new series is aimed at a brand new target audience, whoever they may be, right? I mean, they've got this massive fan base, but they want to target new people. They've looked at it and said, well, okay, if the target audience is young people, we got to start off with something light and fluffy, even if it's kind of dumb, just to get them warmed up, right? I looked at the view and say, is this the best episode they could have started with for a brand new season with a brand new doctor and a brand new companion? And the answer is probably no. But if they say, if the powers that be said, well, okay, people like you and, well, not even me because I don't watch the show, but other fans aren't the target audience, but these young people are, maybe for them it worked. And as Mark mentioned earlier, his family really dialed into it. So from Disney's point of view and the BBC, they might go, it's a big tick. It's worth all the backlash because it's actually attracting the new fan base, which is what they want to do, as a guess. Okay. And just finishing off your uglies. Yes. Go for it.
Well, another one of those. Did we really need a sequence where Ruby gets covered in snot? And I have seen online where a couple of people go, oh, it was a Genesis ship. They were originally thinking maybe it wasn't going to be snot. But of course, I don't think Disney would have gone there. Imagine instead of them taking tissues from babies, taking tissues from a teenager's bedroom, and that's what they were thinking it was going to be. But I do think it's one of those things. They went for gross out and juvenile humor in the first episode, and I just really didn't think that was the way to go with this. It has really divided people. There are some people who really have loved the new tone. I do like the Doctor and Ruby. I think they're great characters and have a great chemistry on screen. And I think they're really doing the best of actors with the scripts they have been given. But yeah, it's not funny. It's just a bit disappointing after 3 years. This is what we start with.
Yeah, it was an unusual gag that they put in, and you do wonder what the purpose of it was. And I don't really know myself, but I think they thought, well, it'll make for a good joke, and away they go. And you go, all right, fine, it is what it is. So, and there was a good comment here from Shane saying about the target audience they want doesn't spend the dollars. They expect everything for free. And that's true. That's why this is such a massive risk. And at the moment, based on just as an observer, as an outside observer, which is me, because I'm not planning to watch the show beyond this, it seems like it's kind of backfiring a bit. Now, whether I don't know if the stories have already been made and they've just got to release them all, or whether they're still in production, or whether somebody says, you know what, we're actually on a bit of a train wreck here. We need some damage control. We need a bit more blood and guts. Who knows? But it hasn't fired off very well. And even I think people who are devoted Doctor Who fans, whether they be male, female, or whatever their age is, there's a lot of people who are saying they didn't really go for space babies at all. It didn't work for them. And that's not a good way to kick things off with a whole new cast. So yeah.
Well, my son, who is on and off a Doctor Who fan, he hasn't watched it for a while. He came back for the specials and said he'd watched the series because he liked it again. He laughed all the way through. And I was like, oh, did you like that? And he said, no, I was actually laughing at the show. And he said, Doctor Who isn't bad anymore. It's just sad, which is really not what they want as a feedback. And he means sad as in it's become pathetic. And my wife, Tennille, sorry, I'll just finish. She watched it and it ended. And she looked at me and she said, when Disney see that, they're going to want their Mickey dollars back.
It's I forgot what I was about to say. It's a funny scenario. It really, really is, and I think it has the potential to alienate a lot of people. And you are right. There could be people who don't like Doctor Who at all like dislike it, right? And go, they'll be laughing at people like you going, look at that, you've been waiting all this time, you get a show and it sucks, you just can't stand it. And of course, people who love Star Trek have been through that, and people who love Star Wars have been through that. So I guess it's like Doctor Who's time. Although, as we said earlier, after what happened with the 13th Doctor, this was meant to be the rejuvenation and a good way to kick everything off, and it kind of hasn't. So with that in mind, is there anything else more you want to say about good old Space Babies?
Are we rating it, or are we leaving that to the end for both of them?
No. We're rating this particular one. So what we've got now, fans, is that Aaron's come up with his own rating system, 1 out of 6, right? In terms of it's the master meter, which he's put together. So, Mr. Aaron, out of your 1 to 6, now the more numbers, the worse it is. The less numbers, the better it is. What did you give Space Baby, son?
Well, I had to give it a rating. You can't give it 0, so I gave it a 1. Well, basically a 6, a full rotten. So there's the master meter. If it's at the green area, it's fresh. If it's at the red area, it's rotten. So people have rotten tomatoes. We've got rotten Time Lords. I'm giving that one of the worst things I've seen in a long time.
And you know what? That's actually really, really sad, because this is something you were really looking forward to, and it had so much promise. Even Ian's just quite simple. Yes, it is sad. Guy has said 3. Now, ask me what I thought of Space Babies. Now that I'll tell you to give it out.
What, Dags, tell me, what did you think of Space Babies?
All things being equal, I didn't hate it. I saw where they were coming from. I found it mildly entertaining, aside from 1 or 2, as I said, the ending being a little bit saccharine. The idea of the kids being in charge of everything, actually, it kind of worked for me. I didn't really dislike it at all, but I could see why it didn't work. I think I got to the end of it and go, you know what? It needed to be a stronger story to start off with. That was really needed a kick in the guts for people to say, oh my God, this is just awesome. And it didn't have that. Having said that, I didn't think it was the worst thing I'd ever seen by a long shot. And there were a couple of bits I go, you know what, that kind of works for me. The kids talking and all the rest of that was fine. The monster, they should not have been saved. Yeah, fine. But and the way he finished it off, as I said, nice and saccharine. But if I was to rate it out of what I think Guy said 3, I'd probably say 3 as well. Certainly everything picks up in the next episode, but unlike for yourselves, where you invested your heart and soul into watching this particular episode, I just found it was like, yeah, okay, give me the next one and we'll go from there. So, but I wasn't crying my eyes out or ready to jump off bridges or anything like that.
I think you're absolutely right with what you said at the beginning of the show, where it's got a bit of the Phantom Menace syndrome, where it's been built up for so long. I'm probably being harder on it than I should. And in a year or two, when you watch it in context, it might get better. For me, I really think this should have been pushed further down into the series in a stronger episode to begin with, at least. Yeah. But we'll see how it goes. It probably has to get better, doesn't it, Dags?
You would think so. And Christy, who's used to doing Crimson Yawns, she said 3 as well. So, yes, for a kickoff series, it needed to be absolute punching massive goals, and it didn't. But then we get in the next episode, and maybe this is intentional. The only thing I can think of is that Disney had said, well, we got these episodes. We can't just release Space Babies by itself, because it's going to be an absolute disaster. It's like when they released the Star Wars series Andor, they put 3 episodes out in one go. So maybe with this, they've said, okay, we've got to do 2 episodes at once, not because we love the fans. We're doing it because, hey, they're going to hate the first one, but the second one's much, much better. And that is possibly an executive decision by somebody at Disney to say, we've got to save the show before we lose everybody on the first day. And that brings up good old The Devil's Chord, which clearly was an improvement over what happened with Space Babies. And even this has caused a bit of angst with some people. And, of course, as you would say, there were some good things about it. And, Mr. Aaron, kick it off, old son. What worked for you regarding The Devil's Chord?
Well, we didn't see a lot of this in Space Babies. And every time we have a new doc, just about every time they redesign the TARDIS, this has to be the most impressive TARDIS console room they've ever done. Some people may like the smaller, more intimate version or ones from the past. For me, it has so much potential for the color. I've got to say the direction on this episode was actually amazing, and obviously the color choices in the background for the palette were there to accentuate the costumes and stuff. But this has the potential of becoming my favorite console room ever, which is something I didn't think I would say. I like the fact that the the rondels change color and it adds mood to the story. And when the TARDIS is going wrong, it can look dark and sick, or it can look light and airy. So I actually think it's really good that the TARDIS is almost more of a character in this series. So love the new console room. It was highlighted most in this episode so far.
Yes, clearly the budget for the set construction has been boosted up. Yes, it's definitely big on the inside. Absolutely, by a long shot. So the key thing about the episode, it worked for me, and I thought, well, this is already a change of pace, right? And this is still stuck in the good. Was the scene at the top, right, with the guy and the kid on the piano, and I don't know what it was, but something about that really worked for me. It was just a good moment between two people on the piano, and I actually forgot it was a Doctor Who show at that point. I really, really got dialed into it. Then the maestro comes out, and I think in terms of a bad guy, blunt terms, bad guy. The maestro was actually quite good, and I liked the concept of the idea that the character takes away all forms of music, and I thought that was really interesting. So I thought, from a story perspective and where it all went after this, it was actually a very good idea.
I think Space Babies missed something from not having the cold opening, because it almost acts as a cliffhanger on one part stories, where you get the cliffhanger, which is only the 5 little minutes at the start, and then it goes into the opening title sequence. So I totally agree with you. And I did think it was a good setup for the villain. And it was interesting that the maestro then looked straight at the audience and then said now, and then started playing the Doctor Who theme, which is an unusual thing for happen in Doctor Who.
I love that. That really, I thought that was excellent. It gets on the piano, goes ding, 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 ding. I thought, and then it just goes straight into the opening credits. I thought, oh yeah, that was ingenious. That really worked for me actually. So, which is very cool. So they chuffed back to 1963, and it's interesting because the Doctor's making a reference to the fact that he was in some other part of London with somebody called Susan or something or other. And of course, that refers directly to William Hartnell's Doctor from 1963, which I thought was actually very clever. And there's all these theories about whether that character is going to make an appearance in this show at some point. You would have. Did you dial into that? I mean, I know you knew the reference, but did you think that was a good move?
Yep, I think it's kind of carried over from what you were saying with Space Babies. They're trying to give crib notes to the audience to Doctor Who's history to fill them in as quickly as they can, kind of thing, by sort of highlighting some of the more key points. But it's always nice when they keep the continuity like that, and at least it does show it's all connected up and it is all still the same show, and they're, are respecting the past at least.
I like this from Guy. The thought of world with no music is just frightening, and I like where it all went as there was no music in the world, and it's actually really, really interesting. And of course, that brings us to the good old Abbey Road and the sequence here. I actually thought the Doctor looked fantastic in the blue suit. Right, it really worked for him. I know the Afro hairstyle is a little bit old school, but I thought, if of the two images, if that was his look going forward for the rest of the entire series, it looked spectacular. I actually thought it really dialed in. And of course, Ruby looked good dressed in her 60s attire.
I was really impressed by the whole opening of this episode. You really can tell as characters they're having fun. And I reckon this would have been a load of fun to film as well, because you can see it on the screen, and going and recreating the Abbey Road album cover. And I don't think it was actually at Abbey Road, because that's changed now from how it used to look back in the 60s. But I did think, and the other thing I have to say, I thought this is going to be fantastic, because they had the song in the TARDIS, and I'm like, oh, they're actually going to have some really cool 60s music in this. They're going to EMI Studios. They're going to meet some pop and some rock and some classic people from music history. I thought this is going to be a really amazing episode.
Aaron Marcus said he liked the episode better. He did like the TARDIS console, as you said. Okay, we'll get to the end at the end, which is when the time comes. Guy has said again the creepy stuff by the Maestro. The Maestro was actually a good villain, and I guess that's one thing that actually did really work for it. And I like the idea that the character had the tuning fork, bing, and made all these sounds. And I thought, what a great idea. I don't know. I don't know how else to describe it, but I'm not very au fait with Doctor Who villains, whether this one rates as high, low, whatever. But for this particular episode, it certainly worked. And what I did like about the show in this particular episode, which he did not get in Space Babies, I liked it when the Doctor is serious, when he and Ruby are really, really knuckling down, trying to figure something out, rather than just all this hairy-fairy, just being really happy all the time. When stuff gets serious and they've got to try and work something out, That I thought was actually the strongest moments in the show. And of course, that linked into the sequence when they're on the roof of the building, and then Ruby's playing the piano. I thought that was a really, really nice moment, and it really dialed into me. But yeah, when the show gets serious and the characters get serious, the show really ramps up again very, very quickly.
Well, it's interesting when she was on the roof because it is one of those meta things that they don't do on TV too much. She was actually playing her theme. So there is Ruby's theme written for her instrumental, and she played that on the piano. The thing that I really thought was good and an amazing sequence for Doctor Who, the sonic screwdriver was actually used for something sonic for a change, and having a absolutely quiet piece of the episode, I really thought ramped up the drama where they're smashing bottles and you can't hear anything, and the you see them mouthing different words and stuff. It's very brave on television for them to have nothing for like a minute, because that kind of is like dead air, and people tune in and think their TV's broken, or they tune straight out again. I guess not on streaming, but I did think that was a really good sequence as well.
I like this one. Yeah, the sonic tuning fork, more sonic than the Doctor's screwdriver, which is quite true. Colin's asked, is the Maestro a new villain? I assume the answer is yes.
Well, that's interesting because you only watched the last episode. It leads in from the special with the Celestial Toy Maker, and
That's right.
he talks about how the Toy Maker is his father, and I don't think anyone knew that. And the first thing we got a hint of that was when he opened the piano and laughed the giggle, which was the main thing from the Toy Maker episode. And it's one of the issues I have with this episode, which is pretty mean of me to say. This would have been a really amazing episode next season or at the end of this season, but just 2 episodes after they've just had the Toy Maker and they've had a universe where all the rules don't work, it was almost a retread of the Celestial Toy Maker episode, but not quite as good. And it wouldn't have seemed that way if it was down the end of the season or in another one. But if you've just had Neil Patrick Harris camping it up as the Toy Maker with musical scenes that I think were better than this episode, it's almost like, yeah, not quite as good as we've just had. So again, for you wouldn't have noticed it. But for me, it detracted from the episode just being so similar to what we just had.
Yep, no, fair enough. Guy said the Doctor was always concerned when he can't name his enemy outright. His fear of the boogeyman originally, but acting was much better. Yeah, exactly right. I mean, when you're looking at the bad guy from the previous episode, which was the boogeyman, the alien, and you got the Maestro on this one, it's just ramped right up big time in terms of adversaries, which is kind of cool. Now, I agree with you on this one when they talked about the whole thing with the Beatles. There's one thing about meeting the Beatles and having the characters there, but having the actual characters look nothing like the real guys at all. And in fact, well, like with John Lennon, if it wasn't for the glasses, you wouldn't know who he was. But I did like the fact they couldn't sing. There was no music in the world. That kind of worked for me. But yeah, I agree with you, as something we discussed previously, that the Beatles at least should have looked like the actual guys, or at least try to look much like them instead of like the monkeys or something.
It is one of those interesting things. If you didn't know they were going to be in the episode, it would have probably been fine. But because the BBC for 6 months have been going, we're doing a Beatles episode, the Beatles are going to be in it, you would want, probably a better representation of the Beatles. The poor actors probably just got hired and now they're going to cop it for not looking right, but that's not their fault. The other thing that's disappointing is they couldn't afford any Beatles music, which is absolutely a load of rubbish, because they could have got some of the music the Beatles covered, like Twist and Shout and some of the stuff that anyone can hire, and they can do a cover version of it with their own actors, and it would have cost them barely anything. Don't put David Bowie in the trailer and then you can't spout for music in the 60s episode, which is all about music. I do understand it's all about there's no music left, but I do think the end of this episode should have been an amazing musical piece that blew everyone away, and it wasn't there because there was nothing recognizable.
Yeah, I agree with you. At the end, you would have thought logically it would have been Beatles music as a juxtaposition. That word juxtaposition, when they couldn't make music at all. Now they're exactly, how they used to be, and of course they're playing their biggest hits, and yeah, that would make sense, as opposed to, as I agree with you, the end scene was like, okay, what are we listening to? So, but I did like the idea that when we speak to the characters, what their mindset was regarding the absence of music in their lives, and they're not happy with what they're doing, and they're just sort of just going through the motions. I didn't mind it. I actually thought this was quite good. And this is actually one of those serious moments where the Doctor and Ruby get together at the end and they go, well, this is bad. What's caused it? how do we fix it? So you've listed it as something as bad, but I actually didn't mind this at all.
Okay, I listed it as bad, not because of the sequence, because of how it was written. They can have a lot of fun in Doctor Who with dialogue, especially because we know the future. And you can say Beatles lyrics without actually, having to pay for them. And when they're saying to the Doctor, "We don't want to do music anymore," don't say, "Doctor, we don't want to do music anymore." Have Paul McCartney say, "Doctor, just let it be." And then you have like John Lennon when Ruby's like, "What do you want to do?" And he goes, "I just want to go home and I just want to lay beside my woman or whatever." You go, and then you say, "I don't want to wake up, get out of bed, drag a comb across my head." And you can do all these amazing Beatles lyrics, like it's all trapped in them, but they can't get it out anymore. And I just thought you could have had so much more fun with the scene than they actually did. I thought the writing wasn't up to the concept on this episode.
See, I don't agree with you because I think if you do that, you make the serious scene laughable because people are then looking for the gags. Oh, it's like, how you feeling, John? It's like, oh, yeah, it's just another day in the life. Oh, my God, that's so funny. And the whole moment has just been completely ruined. The seriousness of what's going on is gone. So I thought the idea of not putting those gags in worked.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring up a day in the life, because I'll bring that up later. Because again, in my head, there was a perfect way to sort of end what was happening here. But we'll keep on going with what we're looking at.
It would have been interesting had they done that, put the jokes in the dialogue. You may have said, "Oh, I love the jokes they put in," but it completely ruined the scene because it was a serious scene. The guys are really unhappy. There's no music in the world, and it became a joke. It became a gag. And you go, "But it's not meant to be funny. It's meant to be serious."
I understand that. Yeah. You're probably right that you can't please everyone.
Yeah,
I'm glad you
exactly
enjoyed
right.
it more than me. Who would have thought this bizarro universe?
I tend to like drama more than the silly stuff. That's why the Space Babies thing kind of didn't work. But this one, I go, "Oh, this is interesting to see where it's going." And you've also listed in the bad, so both the Maestro and the Doctor. So, any particular reason why these are on the list?
This isn't the Maestro and the Doctor. This is them breaking the fourth wall all the time. Doctor Who has occasionally broken the fourth wall, and I think it's been okay. In the 60s, William Hartnell turned to the camera and said, "And by the way, a Merry Christmas for everyone watching at home," because it was a Christmas fun episode, and it was a silly episode in the middle of a Dalek story. Tom Baker used to break the fourth wall. Like, he'd look at the camera and go, "Even the sonic screwdriver isn't going to get me out of this one," and things like that. And the producer hated it, but they couldn't stop him from doing it because he was just so uncontrollable sometimes on set. This series, they kind of knowingly look at the audience. You'd have watched, you said you watched The Church on Ruby Road, where it ended with the woman looking at the audience and saying, "What, you think I don't know what a TARDIS is?" And you've got the Doctor saying, "There's always a twist at the end," looking down the camera and winking. And then you've got Jinx, the Maestro, at the start, where she plays the Doctor Who theme, but she looks down the camera at the audience and says, "What now?" Now, unless there's a particular reason for that, as in they're in a TV show that they don't know or something like that, I don't think you should break the fourth wall all the time. For me, it sort of dispels the drama. It makes it all a TV show, and it's all smug and laughing at itself.
Which is kind of funny because a moment ago you wanted to put in funny dialogue into the Beatles. But I get what you're saying. I totally get where you're coming from, dude. And I picked up on the Doctor doing it, and that was pretty evident. But I didn't really twig on the Maestro so much. I don't know. Maybe it didn't impact me as much as you. But you've been watching the show for a lot longer, so yeah, that's a fair call. Absolutely, no problems whatsoever. So they're trying to see what happened in the future regarding the absence of music, and they go fast forward into, I assume it's 2024, and all of Britain has been destroyed and whatever else. I love the visuals of this. Similar in Space. No, it was Space Babies when they go to the dinosaur scene. They go to and when she stood on the butterfly. I thought that was actually kind of funny. Actually, I actually did laugh at that moment. But this I thought was actually quite good. What would the world be like without music? And of course, there would be a lot of angst, and there would be a lot of frustration, and of course, a lot more aggression, and blah, the world gets destroyed. I actually didn't mind this sequence at all. But didn't work for you.
This is a fantastic sequence. No, it's a great sequence. It's absolutely fantastic. And I've put it in the ugly. It's fantastic, except it's stolen from Pyramids of Mars, line for line, where the Sarah's like, "Why can't we just leave? I'm from 1980. I know that the Earth didn't die in 1980, and the Doctor takes her to the future, and it's an alternate future, and she comes out and she's like, "Oh, I'm from 1980," like, and it is same like on a bigger budget. You don't see when Sarah goes to the future, it's like some painted mountains with some sand being thrown in front of it, but it is the same thing. And this is what I'm saying about, I think it's a soft reboot where they're taking the greatest hits from old Doctor Who episodes and putting it in for new fans to go, oh, this is cool. But the thing is, it was better the first time round, and if you can't make something better than when you first do it, make something new up for your episode. So I don't hate the sequence. For me, it's just an ugly, stands out for me as a callback to another episode.
That is interesting that they should plagiarize their own material. Yeah, that would irk a lot of people. And Greg also mentioned about the fourth wall thing, didn't actually like it either. So you are right. If you're going to steal off your own material, at least do an improvement on it and boost it up and make it better. Don't downgrade it or make it worse. And yeah, if fans are saying, hang on, you've just swiped that from somewhere else, that is not ideal. Sticking with the ugly theme, I assume this you weren't happy with the climax and the whole thing with all the musical notes and all the rest of it.
I wasn't. It pains me that I'm a better writer than the show's show. If they were going to have a musical duel, actually have a really amazing musical duel. This is the maestro that has all the music of the universe, or Earth at least, in her, and can pull out anything. And you've got a Time Lord that's lived for centuries and centuries. Couldn't they have started with classical music where she plays Beethoven, so he plays Mozart, and it moves forward through different styles, and you get all this amazing stuff? It was ugly because it wasn't amazing. It wasn't the greatest Devil Went Down to Georgia fiddling and stuff like that. It was just good. And it should have been freaking off the chart. If they want to do a Glee musical special at the end of this episode, put all that effort into the episode and do an amazing, playoff between the maestro. Have them pulling in the artists from Abbey Road and getting them to play the music they have in them and bring it all back and have this amazing. It was just good, and that's why it wasn't good enough for me. They've had 3 years to get this ready, and it wasn't one of those things you'll put on YouTube, that clip, and hundreds of people will watch it because it's such a good musical clip. There's nothing there. Do you remember any of the music from it?
No, I don't. So
well, you should. It should.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
No, that's a completely fair point.
Yeah, that's why it's in the ugly for me.
Yep, no, that's fair enough. The thing I found myself, you got the musical bars, I don't know what the term is, where the musical strands running around the place. I thought in another time and place, if they could do a bit more like a Silent Hill and make it a bit more violent, that would have been kind of groovy, like a bit of blood and guts. Because in the end, it's this stuff that's just floating around. It just looks like rather average CG, really. And I thought, it just needed a little bit more darkness, but I know what they're trying to push for. Yeah, okay, fair enough. But I agree with you. Yeah, if you're going to have a music battle off, it's got to be something that is like, wow, this is like a dueling banjo scenario. So
yeah, exactly. They did a better musical battle in Doctor Strange. I don't know if you saw the Multiverse of Madness, where the evil Doctor Strange plays the music against the good Doctor Strange, and it was better than this. I guess that's on Marvel money, but it's all Disney money now, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And sticking with the ugly theme, look, it was underwhelming is probably the best way of putting it. And of course, you always know how this is going to end. I mean, the bad guy's going to lose and the good guys are going to win. It's a question of how they do it. So, yes.
Yeah. So you see there, they have done the whole, and I did notice, I don't know if anyone else said, probably, Jinx, the maestro is wearing a parody of Sergeant Pepper's top there, I thought. I don't know if you picked that up. But
no,
again, you see you've got the Doctor and Ruby playing duets together. And again, it should have just been amazingly memorable. And the other thing, it breaks musical rules. She goes, can you discover the chord? And he pulls out 4 or 5 notes, and then he plays one wrong, and he doesn't get it. But that isn't a chord. That's playing notes. A chord is when you play all of them together. So I just thought, you're breaking the rules kind of thing of what you're trying to do. I did think it was cool that the Doctor got dragged inside a timpani drum, and Ruby got stuffed inside a cello. That's very the same rules of the Celestial Toymaker and the kind of thing he does when people lose against him. So it wasn't terrible. It's just, again, I wish it had for something that's been in production for so long, I just think it should be better written. It should have been more
Yeah, I think
spectacle.
Yeah, I think sometimes they hit walls and they need to wrap these things up quickly. So having the piano sitting out in the corridor with the notes sitting right above it, and I think it's supposed to be Paul and John come along and go, "Oh yeah, we're just going to just go do this last little bit and then save the day." That was kind of a bit
Yeah.
on the weak. That was a
Well,
bit on the weak side.
here's here's something that I think would have been amazing. They come out, they see the notes there, and the one is missing, and they add to it. Now, you said about A Day in the Life earlier. Wouldn't it have been cool? Because they could have used it if they'd used that one chord, the one note on the day in the
Yeah.
life. And then when it's all wrapped up and Ruby goes to the doctor, but what if someone plays the forbidden chord again and releases her? The doctor goes, but the one to seal her up is the last note on Sergeant Pepper's, the album that will be playing 24 hours a day all over the planet for the rest of history. So she'll be sealed forever, because they don't address that. What if someone releases her again?
Yeah, no, it's a fair point. So yeah, it was a bit of a for a reasonably good episode that had a fair bit of tension. It kind of wrapped up a little bit like, oh, okay, that was a bit simple, a bit easy. Anyway, so
Yeah.
be it, Jedi. But then it gets straight after that, and even this, I got to go. What is the? Even my other half was watching this with me at the time, thinking, what is the deal with this? The big musical scene. And I don't know. I got all being. It just didn't work for me at all. I just didn't get it. I didn't understand it. And I agree with you. I thought, why aren't they using Beatles music? It would have made a lot of sense to do that. Yeah, twist and shout or something that
Well,
is famous for the Beatles. But yeah,
that's what the doctor says. He goes, there's always a twist at the end. And I thought, oh, they're going to do
that's
it.
right.
They're going to do twist and shout. And Russell T Davies has been smart, because he just said, don't expect Beatles music. And that isn't a Beatles song. That's a song they covered. So they could have done that relatively, I don't know the production, but relatively cheaply, I presume. And it could have been, I think if they were going to put this in it, move this sequence 10 minutes earlier, and this is what like helps the doctor defeat the maestro. There is that little teaser from the maestro when she's getting sucked back into the piano, where the one that waits is coming, which is obviously the story arc for this series as well. And one of the things we didn't discuss in Space Babies, and that's probably because I didn't give you a picture of it, you know, the scene where he's screening Ruby to see what the deal is and looking at her
the
DNA.
DNA thing. Yeah.
Yeah, they've done that before. They did that with Amy. Exactly the same scene. I just like, it is a greatest hits of old Doctor Who episodes. They've said, oh, that went down well, so we'll do this again.
Yeah, I think what's happened in this particular episode, they said, oh, we've got a little bit of darkness here. We need to liven it up with a song at the end, right? Completely out of character, completely unnecessary, but it's once again just bringing the mood back up at the expense of the actual story we've just had. And yeah, very disappointing. So, and with that in mind, you've actually said that particular, I think it's the song and dance number, should fit into a Barbie movie. Is that right?
He really did. It was, you know, he was in the Barbie movie, and what they've done is bring a bit of that live big screen magic to Doctor Who, and I just think it jarred. I thought it really detracted at the end of the episode for me. It could have been really good if it had just been reworked, but I'm not rating the idea I have in my head, which I think is much better than what we actually got. And you know, the frustrating thing about this one could have been a classic episode if they just, you know, had a script editor that had changed a little bit. I don't know. This one frustrated me. I gave you ratings for this one. I was a bit harsh on it. I've probably, after watching it again today, getting some of the pictures together, I've probably gone for more a three out of 6 rather than what I was saying, a 5 out of 6. So it's relatively fresh. It's a little on the nose because some of the stuff in it. I did enjoy this episode, and I have to think if it's in the same sort of universe as the Toymaker, where usual physics don't make sense, I can enjoy it more. I just think, you know, they needed a script editor or another pass at the script or something. What did you think overall?
Look, I didn't mind it, but I didn't like the dance number at the end. And hang on, even Greg has agreed with you. Musical segment could have worked and better during the story. I don't think it needed one at all. Caused by the maestro. No, it's just it would have just jarred. But I like the concept. But yeah, as I said, tacked in the end without any context, and there was no context to it. It was just there. It was almost like a filler. We need to fill in some time. We'll just put a dance number in. Yeah.
The other thing they did, which I don't think they should do in Doctor Who, when they walked back to the TARDIS, why was Abbey Road making musical notes and lighting up as they walked across it?
I don't know.
I just think that
that
sort of is a step too far. If it's in a fantasy world, yes, but once this maestro's been banished, that should be it. Everything's back to normal.
Yeah. So in terms of the actual episode itself, aside from a few moments of like, oh, where we go on this, the rest of it I actually thought was quite good. I thought this is actually quite interesting and intriguing. So I don't know where it leads to from here, but I mean, it is safe to say that even a better episode hasn't set the world on fire. There's a lot of people who said they've still marked it down. So it's not exactly a good start for this particular series. So as to where it goes from here on out, I don't know. And what I don't know about the history of Doctor Who episodes over the past 15 or so years, but the fact they got an entire story wrapped up in like 50 minutes, as opposed to back in the 80s and 70s where they used to go for like 2 hours, like feature-length stories. I don't know if that's got something to do with it or not, rather than having a bit of an arc that's spread over a couple of episodes and make it a bit more feature-length. Maybe that has something to do with it, and they have to just shorten everything down to fit it within the hour. Create the problem, figure out the problem, solve the problem, done, and they've got to cut corners along the way. I'm not sure if that has anything to do with it or not. So
a lot of it does feel very rushed, and everyone speaks very fast. I noticed in Space Babies, one of the things I really didn't like was how fast everything was cut. If you try and get images of the monster from that episode, boy, you've got to have precision pause to actually get one, because it's cut so fast you can't even pause it and see what that monster looks like.
But that might, from a movie making perspective, that might be intentional, so you don't get to sit and analyze it and go, hang on, I can see how fake it really looks. I've done that myself in some of my material. Do you think these were written before Moffat came on board?
From what I've heard, Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat had a plan to come back and save Doctor Who 2 years into the Jodie Whittaker era. So no, I think they always knew what they wanted and what they were going to do. Whether next week's episode, which is written by Stephen Moffat, will be in this same tone or it will be more adult, because he seems to do much more adult stuff, I guess we'll find out next week.
Yes, I'm certainly keen to see where it all goes from here. So, but I've got an idea as to what they're aiming for, and as I said earlier, I think it definitely is aimed at a children's family market at the expense of the traditional fans. So, but the good news, it could only go up from here. But the bad news is, if it's starting off on a really low note, and to be fair, Space Babies was a pretty low note, that would, for people like yourself, that would be like, that's not what we were hoping for. So, anyway, but wait and see. What do you reckon about that, Mr. Aaron?
Just to give you some insight on one of the polls I saw, which is on one of Gallifrey Base, one of the bigger Doctor Who sort of websites, they had a poll. What was the worst opening story for a Doctor? And this one won out of all 60 years. So, and there are some other stinkers in that poll as well. So that's a bit disappointing.
Yes, indeedy, duty, dotties. Well, we're about to wrap up. We've sort of gone through. In fact, normally we do in DNA reviews, they take us an hour to get through an episode of anything. But this one, there really wasn't a lot to sort of mull over. There's good bits, there's bad bits, and bits that just didn't work at all. So the two episodes we've kind of plowed through them as rather quickly, as it were. So before I get some final thoughts from you, for those who don't know, aren't aware of it, if you want to see any more of the Sci-Fi Zone stuff, just go to the Sci-Fi Zone socials, YouTube and Instagram or whatever else. The show's coming out all the time. And I mentioned it right at the start of the show, your shop, Mr. Aaron, all the Docky Who stuff you could ever shake a sonic screwdriver at, preferably a sonic screwdriver that looks like a sonic screwdriver.
Yeah, and I would say without hyperbole, I think in Victoria, at least, we have the biggest collection of Doctor Who merchandise. If you're looking for anything, classic, new, right up to the latest release action figures, right back to 60s memorabilia. So if you are a collector, come on in and say hi.
Shane has just said time and Rani. Rani got referenced actually in the first Space Babies. It just was an offhanded comment. Yeah. So I thought, okay, very good. So yeah, very, very good. So there you go. Anyway, so that's the Docky Who review for this particular day. How exciting is that? We'll be back next Tuesday to yap on about episode 3. Let's hope it's a good one, fans. Now, this is more your thing than my thing. So, dude, how are you feeling about it all? You upset? You're disappointed? Or are you just optimistic that hopefully you can just get it better?
Well, I still think it's better than the previous era, so I'm happy about that. I do absolutely really love Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor, and Millie Gibson is fantastic as Ruby. I think they absolutely made the best choice with them. And I do think bad stories can be saved by good acting. So I think they're doing best with the material they've had so far. It does look as characters that they're having fun, and he is very doctorish, a little more camp than he used to be, but that's not an issue for me at all. I think he's great. The question is, as a non-Doctor Who fan, have you been won over?
No, I mean, I watched it because we're going to do this show, but I'm going to play through the rest because I kind of have to for these reviews, but I'm not interested at all. It hasn't converted me, put it that way. I was expecting to go, oh my God, where has this show been all my whole life? I just missed everything. This is spectacular. It's really good quality. And funnily enough, you and I can rattle off some sci-fi TV shows that absolutely just draw you in. But to be fair, most of those are pretty adult, pretty hardcore, pretty serious. And of course, this show is designed not to be that way. So I think if I was a Disney person, me personally, am not the target audience, right? Forget about me. Aim for people much, much younger and get those people on board instead, especially if they're looking at doing this show for the next couple of decades or whatever else. So, but no, I thought it didn't really work for me. So, but it wasn't all bad either. It wasn't a complete train wreck. So, there you go.
Well, we're out of time, but the one thing that's disappointing for me, the new series has been back since 2006, and there are jumping on points during that series that I think if you had started at this season or you had started at this season, you would have had a positive experience and wanted to watch more. This is not a series I would recommend as a jumping on point for anyone who wants to get into new Doctor Who, and that's what Disney were wanting, I think.
You said that to me about Legend of the Sea Devils, and look where we ended up after that. Mark Dunner said, thanks, guys. Okay, Aaron, if you know where to find him, if you need a shoulder to cry on, I reckon he's going to need one as soon as this episode's finished. So there you go. Anyway, fans, we're going to party hard rock on. Leave you to it. We're back next Tuesday with a bit more Docky Who, which is particularly cool, and hopefully it's a bit better than what we've had so far. But hey, the only way is up, as they say. All right, guys, leave you to it. Party hard, and we'll see you next week. Okay, ta-ta.
And no, we will see you on Thursday night for Talking Stuff.
We are, but there's no Docky Who in that. So there you go. All right, leave you to it, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.